Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving deep into a theological study that really challenges some common ideas about one of Christianity's biggest beliefs, the resurrection. We're going to treat this like a detective story, following the clues in the source text to piece together a major puzzle. Okay, so what's the big mystery? It all comes down to this. Is the resurrection one single massive event at the end of time, or is it actually a complex process that happens in multiple stages? According to our source, getting the answer to this one question unlocks a totally new way of reading some key parts of the Bible. All right, here's our game plan. We've got 5 key steps in this investigation. We'll start with the core puzzle, then check out the 2 main theories, the usual suspects. From there, we'll follow the scriptural clues, identify the key players, and then finally, we'll put all the pieces together to reveal the complete timeline. First things first, let's really lay out the core puzzle here. The source we're looking at argues that how you answer just a few key questions will completely shape your entire understanding of the end times. Now, these aren't just questions for theology class. As our source explains, your take on these, whether it's one event or a series of them, and whether it happens before or after that 1,000-year kingdom, basically puts you into one of 2 major camps of Christian thought. The timing, as they say, is absolutely everything. So let's bring in our 2 usual suspects. These are the most common ways people have interpreted the resurrection, what's known as amillennialism and premillennialism. The main disagreement, according to this analysis, really boils down to how you read the phrase first resurrection in the book of Revelation. The amillennial view says it's symbolic, like a spiritual rebirth. But the premillennial view takes it literally, seeing 2 separate events, one resurrection for believers before the 1,000-year kingdom, and another for non-believers after. Now, our source really takes issue with the amillennial view. It argues that by spiritualizing the first resurrection, you're kind of sidestepping the plain language of the text, which seems to be describing a very literal physical event. But that brings us to the big snag with the premillennial view, at least according to our source. And it's a huge logical question. If believers get these perfect, glorified heavenly bodies at that first resurrection, why on earth, literally, do they then hang around for another 1,000 years? It just seems like a really strange layover on the way to their final home. Okay, so with some pretty big problems in our usual suspects, our source tells us to look at a single, often overlooked passage of Scripture that just might hold the key to this whole mystery. The entire case hinges on this one passage from 1 Corinthians 15. This reading presents it as the definitive roadmap, the one place where the Apostle Paul spells out the exact chronological order of the resurrection. The argument is everything else has to fit into this framework. And here it is. It's not one single event. It's a clear, multi-stage process. First, you have Christ's own resurrection. Next up, a specific group of believers at his coming. And finally, a stage that's simply called the end. See? It's a sequence. The key phrase here, the one that changes everything, is then the end. This interpretation argues that this little phrase proves the resurrection at his coming can't possibly be the final one. Nope, there's at least one more step in the process. The story isn't over yet. And this right here leads to a game-changing question. If there's another resurrection that happens at the end, then who exactly are the people getting resurrected at his coming? Well, according to this analysis, it can't be all believers. It has to be a smaller, much more specific group. And that idea changes everything. So that brings us to the next big clue in our investigation. If it's not all believers being raised at Christ's coming, then who are the stars of what Revelation calls the first resurrection? To identify this exclusive group, our investigation now turns to Revelation chapter 20. According to this reading, this is where we get a really detailed description of our mystery participants. And there it is, right from the text. It's incredibly specific, isn't it? It talks about people who were beheaded for their faith, and also those who resisted the beast. Our source breaks this down into 2 very distinct groups. So here's the crucial point. This isn't about all Christians. The argument is that the text is pointing specifically to those who paid the ultimate price for their faith. This is a resurrection for the martyrs, both those from history and those from a final period of tribulation. And this completely redefines the first resurrection. It's not some general event for every believer. Instead, it's a special reward, an exclusive honor for a select group of martyrs, giving them the privilege of ruling with Christ. This shifts the whole thing from a universal event to a specific earned honor. Okay, time to assemble all the clues. We've got the sequence from 1 Corinthians, and we've identified the special participants from Revelation. Now we can put it all together into the complete, unified timeline that's presented in our source material. But wait, there's one final piece of the puzzle. Revelation says the rest of the dead did not come to life until the 1,000 years were ended. Well, if the first resurrection is only for martyrs, who are the rest of the dead? That group has to include the vast majority of believers, right? And here is the proposed solution. The rest of the dead doesn't mean non-believers. It means all the other saints, the non-martyrs, who have to wait until after the millennium is over for their turn. This creates a 1,000-year gap between the resurrection of the martyrs and the resurrection of everybody else. And here it is, the completed timeline according to this interpretation. Let's walk through it. It starts with Christ's resurrection, the first fruits. Then, at his return, you get the first resurrection, but it's for martyrs only. They reign for 1,000 years. After that millennium, all the other believers are resurrected, and that leads into the final judgment for all of humanity. So by following this very specific order, this interpretation claims to solve the whole mystery. It keeps the first resurrection literal, which answers the problem with amillennialism, and it explains why glorified bodies would reign on earth. It's a special reward for martyrs, which solves the logical puzzle of premillennialism. Case closed, according to the source. And that's our deep dive into this really unique theological theory. Now, whether you're convinced by the evidence or not, it's a powerful reminder that even the most familiar texts can hold these hidden complexities, challenging us to keep re-examining what we think we know. It makes you wonder, right? What other foundational beliefs might be hiding similar, intricate structures, just waiting to be discovered?